Let's talk about the fastest way to evaporate a woman's respect. Needing her more than you need your own purpose. This isn't about affection, it's about addiction. When you orbit her world like a satellite, when her texts become your emotional oxygen, when her attention dictates your self-worth, you've already surrendered the very qualities that made you attractive in the first place. Consider the biology of attraction. Women are instinctively repelled by neediness because it signals one terrifying truth: this man cannot survive without me. That's not romantic. It's a liability. Imagine a ship captain who abandons the wheel to beg passengers for validation. Would you trust him to navigate a storm? Neither will she. Your emotional dependence forces her into a role she never signed up for. Your therapist, your cheerleader, your emotional caretaker. And resentment always follows obligation. This manifests in subtle behaviors: analyzing her tone for hidden meanings, rearranging your schedule, hoping for scraps of her time, molding your opinions to match hers. Each compromise seems small, but collectively they scream, "I have no core." Contrast this with the man who's engaged in his own mission. His calm isn't indifference, it's the quiet confidence of someone who knows his value isn't determined by her mood swings. He doesn't check in compulsively, he connects meaningfully. That's the paradox. The less you need her, the more she'll want to be needed by you. The fix isn't pretending not to care, it's having something to care about beyond her. Purpose is the antidote to neediness. When you're consumed by building a life, not a fantasy, your energy shifts from "do you like me" to "do I like you?" That subtle flip changes everything. She'll either rise to match your self-respect or reveal herself as someone who preferred you weak. Either way, you win. A woman's respect isn't lost in grand moments, it's surrendered in the thousand small ways a man abandons himself. There's a fundamental truth about masculine attractiveness that transcends cultural boundaries and personal preferences. Women are biologically wired to seek men who demonstrate competence in the real world. This isn't about materialism or superficial status. It's about the undeniable link between your ability to navigate reality and her instinctive assessment of your worth as a partner. When you stagnate, when weeks turn into months without progress, when your ambitions remain theoretical, when you're chronically figuring things out, you're not just failing to move forward, you're actively eroding her respect. Consider the evolutionary psychology behind this phenomenon. For thousands of generations, women who partnered with competent, resourceful men survived and thrived. Those who didn't faced harsh consequences. This selective pressure created an instinctual attraction to markers of capability, not because women are gold diggers, but because survival literally depended on these discernments. Fast forward to today, while the stakes might be lower, the wiring remains identical. When she asks, "What are you working on?" and you respond with excuses rather than exciting developments, something primal within her disengages. This manifests in subtle but devastating ways. That sigh you hear when you mention playing video games instead of attending that certification course, the way her eyes glaze over when you complain about your job for the 100th time without taking action, these aren't judgments about your hobbies or temporary circumstances. They're biological alarms signaling this man isn't building a future worth joining. Women don't expect perfection, but they do need evidence that you're engaged in the heroic process of becoming more competent. The modern world has complicated this dynamic with dangerous illusions. Social media peddles the fantasy that confidence alone is enough, that you can manifest success without the grueling work of actual skill acquisition. This is spiritual bypassing of the highest order. Real masculine appeal has always been grounded in demonstrable mastery. The craftsman who shapes wood with precision, the entrepreneur who solves real problems, the scholar who wrestles with complex ideas. These men command respect because they've submitted themselves to the tempering fire of difficulty and emerged more capable. Your bank account isn't the measure here. Your trajectory is. She can endure temporary scarcity if you're clearly ascending. I've seen women stand by men through bankruptcies and career changes when those men demonstrated relentless commitment to growth. Conversely, I've watched relationships crumble amid material comfort because the man stopped striving. The difference lies in whether she sees you as someone who solves problems or becomes one This isn't about performing for her approval. That would just be another form of neediness. Authentic ambition flows from embracing responsibility as your birthright. The healthiest masculine energy doesn't ask, what do I need to do to keep her? But rather, what must I become to fulfill my potential? When you orient yourself this way, an interesting shift occurs. She starts worrying about keeping your attention rather than you worrying about keeping hers. Practical steps matter here. Map out a 5-year vision with measurable milestones, not vague success fantasies, but concrete plans like master this trade, save this amount, build this skill. Women detect the difference between daydreaming and determined planning at an instinctive level. Your ability to articulate this path and, more importantly, to take daily action on it communicates reliability more eloquently than any love letter ever could. The bitter truth? If you're not growing, you're decaying. There's no neutral in nature. That project you've been postponing, that skill you've been meaning to develop, that financial hole you've been ignoring, these aren't just personal failures. They're silent respect killers in your relationship. Every day you tolerate mediocrity is another brick in the wall between you and her admiration. But here's the glorious flip side. Nothing rebuilds lost respect faster than demonstrable progress. Not promises, proof. When she sees you rising at dawn to work on your craft, when she notices you replacing complaint with focused effort, when she witnesses you handling setbacks with stoic determination, something alchemical happens. You're not just improving your circumstances, you're resurrecting her belief in you. A man without purpose isn't just failing himself, he's abandoning his post in the shared struggle against life's chaos. The fastest way to dismantle a woman's respect isn't through overt failure, it's through the slow erosion of trust that comes when your words lose their weight. Every unkept promise, every canceled plan, every I'll get to it later, is a tiny fracture in the foundation of her belief in you. Women don't expect perfection, but they require predictability. Not because they're controlling, but because their biological wiring interprets reliability as safety, and safety is the unspoken prerequisite for genuine attraction. Consider what you're really communicating when you say you'll call at 8 and text at 9:30 with excuses. It's not just about the phone call, it's a subconscious revelation that your word isn't bonded to action. In ancestral environments, this disconnect could mean the difference between a protected pregnancy and starvation. Modern women may not face these literal stakes, but their nervous systems still react to inconsistency as what it fundamentally is, a threat signal. The man who says, "I'll handle it," and does so without fanfare, builds more attraction through that simple follow-through than another man might with grand romantic gestures. This principle manifests most dangerously in what psychologists call commitment creep, those small assurances you give just to smooth over a present moment, with no intention of fulfillment. Yes, we'll take that vacation. I'll definitely help with that project. Let's plan that date night. When these micro promises accumulate without execution, they don't just disappoint, they train her to stop believing in you entirely. The opposite is equally powerful. The man who underpromises and overdelivers creates compound interest in her respect. The solution isn't to stop making commitments, that's the coward's way out, but to ruthlessly align your speech with your capacity for action. Before speaking an assurance, pause. Ask yourself, am I willing to reorganize my priorities to make this real? If not, have the courage to say, I can't commit to that, rather than the cowardice of false assurance. This honesty, while sometimes uncomfortable in the moment, builds a foundation of trust that superficial agreeableness can never match. Interestingly, this dynamic extends beyond romantic relationships into how she observes you interacting with the world. Does your landlord wait endlessly for that rent check you promised would arrive Tuesday? Do your buddies chuckle about how you always bail on plans? Women notice these patterns with terrifying accuracy, assembling them into what anthropologists call a reputation dossier, an unconscious assessment of whether you're a man who shapes reality or one who's perpetually shaped by it. The repair begins with brutal self-honesty about your current reliability quotient. For the next 30 days, practice this. For every word you speak about future action, write it down as a debt owed to your integrity. Let that list haunt you until each item is resolved. You'll quickly discover how often you've been trading in counterfeit promises, and more importantly, you'll begin experiencing the surge of authentic confidence that comes when your speech and conduct become perfectly aligned. A man's word should be an unbreakable contract, first with himself, then with the world. There exists a dangerous misconception that avoiding conflict makes you a nice guy worthy of respect. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you consistently swallow your objections, when you let disrespect slide for the sake of keeping the peace, when you refuse to stand firm on your boundaries, you're not being kind, you're being cowardly. And cowardice is the silent killer of a woman's respect. Women possess an almost supernatural ability to detect the difference between genuine kindness and fearful compliance. The former stems from strength, the conscious choice to be gracious when you could dominate. The latter reeks of weakness, the inability to confront what needs confronting. Consider this: every time you laugh off an insult that should have been addressed, every time you let her walk over your clearly stated boundaries, every time you allow others to disrespect you in her presence, you're not preserving harmony. You're demonstrating that your dignity is negotiable. This plays out in subtle but devastating ways. That backhanded compliment from her friend that you pretended not to hear, she heard it, and she noticed you didn't defend yourself. Those plans you carefully made that she canceled last minute without apology, she registered your lack of pushback. These aren't small oversights. They're data points in her unconscious assessment of whether you're someone who can be relied upon to protect and lead when life gets difficult. The paradox is that women often test men this way without even realizing it. A sharp comment here, a minor boundary push there. These aren't always conscious acts of aggression. They're primal probes to determine if you're the kind of man who will stand firm when real challenges arise. Fail these small tests, and she'll not only lose respect, she'll feel genuinely unsafe at a visceral level. After all, if you won't stand up for yourself, how could you possibly stand up for her? This doesn't mean you should look for reasons to be combative. True strength is selective in its battles. The man who argues over everything is as weak as the man who argues over nothing. Both are controlled by external forces rather than inner principle. The difference lies in knowing what hills are worth dying on. Your values, your non-negotiables, your core identity. These must be defended with calm, unshakable firmness. Everything else can be let go with grace. The solution begins with developing what ancient warriors called the still point, that unshakable center that remains firm regardless of external chaos. When she says something unacceptable, respond immediately but calmly. That doesn't work for me. When others disrespect you, correct them in the moment, not with anger, but with the quiet certainty of a man who knows his worth. You'll be astonished at how quickly her demeanor changes when she witnesses this quality in you. A woman's deepest attraction isn't triggered by what you're willing to do for her, but by what you're unwilling to tolerate from her. There exists a particularly corrosive mindset that will drain a woman's respect faster than any external failure. The perpetual victim mentality. When you habitually blame circumstances, bad luck, or other people for your problems, instead of taking radical responsibility, you're not just describing your life, you're advertising your unfitness as a partner. Women possess an evolutionary radar for this weakness, and it triggers something deep and primal: disgust. Not the theatrical kind, but the quiet, irreversible sort that can't be reasoned away. This manifests in subtle but devastating phrases. My boss has it out for me, instead of, I need to improve my performance. Women only care about money rather than, I need to develop more valuable skills. Each complaint acts as a brick in a wall between you and her respect. Why? Because at their core, victim statements are confessions of powerlessness. And nothing is less attractive than a man who confesses he can't steer his own life. The bitter irony is that many men think they're bonding when they share these grievances, not realizing they're actually documenting their own inadequacy. The neurological truth is even more damning. When you verbalize victim narratives, you're not just describing reality, you're reinforcing neural pathways that make future victimhood more likely. Your brain believes what you tell it, and so does hers. Every I can't or it's not fair isn't just a complaint, It's programming that shapes both your future behavior and her perception of your competence. Women don't expect you to control every circumstance, but they need to see you taking ownership of your response to those circumstances. The antidote isn't fake positivity, it's rigorous self-honesty. Next time you catch yourself starting a victim statement, perform this mental edit. Transform "I had to" into "I chose to." Change "they made me" to "I allowed." This linguistic shift seems small but carries monumental psychological weight. Suddenly, you're no longer at the mercy of forces beyond your control. You're an active participant shaping your destiny. This mindset, when consistently applied, doesn't just change how she sees you, it changes who you become. Here's the uncomfortable truth women know but rarely articulate. How you handle life's unfairness matters more than the unfairness itself. Two men can experience identical setbacks, a job loss, a betrayal, a financial hit. The one who analyzes his own role in the disaster and formulates a recovery plan commands respect. The one who wallows in "why me" becomes invisible. This distinction explains why some men gain a woman's devotion during crises while others lose it. It's never about the storm, but about who you choose to be in it. The victim mindset is especially toxic because it's self-perpetuating. Each excuse made today becomes a justification for underperformance tomorrow, creating a downward spiral of diminishing capability and respect. Break the cycle by instituting a simple rule. For every problem identified, you must propose at least one actionable solution before voicing it. This discipline transforms you from a complainer to a problem solver, the kind of man women instinctively admire. A man who won't take responsibility for his life can't be trusted with anyone else's. There's a particular kind of self-betrayal that evaporates a woman's respect faster than almost anything else. The desperate scramble to win back someone who's already shown you they're willing to walk away. When you chase after rejection, when you double text after being left on red, when you orchestrate grand gestures for someone who's made it clear they don't value you, you're not proving your devotion, you're documenting your lack of self-respect. And nothing is less attractive than a man who treats himself like an option. This behavior triggers something primal in a woman's psyche. Where you might think your persistence demonstrates love, what she actually sees is a man with no better alternatives, and therefore no real value. It's the romantic equivalent of a store having a perpetual clearance sale. No one values what's always available at a discount. Your willingness to abandon your dignity to keep her attention doesn't make you noble, it makes you predictable. And predictability is the death of attraction. The psychology here is brutal but important to understand. Every time you break your own boundaries to plead for another chance, you're reinforcing her subconscious belief that you're lower status. Women are exquisitely attuned to social hierarchies, and nothing drops your position faster than refusing to accept when you've been demoted. That text you're drafting at 2 a.m., it's not changing her mind. It's chiseling your weakness into stone where she'll never unsee it. This isn't about playing hard to get. That's just neediness in disguise. True strength comes from genuine indifference to those who've proven themselves unworthy of you. The man who walks away without fanfare at the first clear sign of disinterest doesn't do so out of pride, but from the quiet confidence of someone who knows his attention is a privilege, not a right. That quality, the ability to take no seriously, is paradoxically what makes women question whether they were too hasty. The solution lies in recalibrating your response to rejection. When she pulls away, match her energy, not as a tactic, but as self-respect. If she cancels plans, don't reschedule. Wait for her to propose an alternative. If texts go unanswered, let the silence stretch indefinitely. This accomplishes two critical things. It reveals whether her disinterest was temporary mood or permanent assessment, and it preserves your dignity regardless of the outcome. Here's the counterintuitive truth women rarely admit. Nothing makes them reconsider a man more than watching him move on with quiet purpose, not as punishment, but as natural consequence. When she sees you reinvesting that energy into your health, your mission, your growth, it forces a reckoning. Either she recognizes what she's losing, or she makes room for someone who will. A man who won't walk away from disrespect can't be trusted to walk toward anything worthwhile.